Namaskar. Welcome to National Mission on Libraries. Today I will be discussing about open source and open access model. The topic name is open access, open source software for libraries. As you are aware that libraries in the modern era needs to depend on lot of technological tools. The tools are generally based on electronic equipment, electronic gadgets, the ICT infrastructure, as well as software. So hardware and software plays a major role in libraries for automation as well as for digitization. Now, all libraries are going on budget cut. It is very difficult for libraries to meet the expenditure required for the technological tools. In this context, let us see what are the cost-effective or low-cost model which can be helpful to the libraries for their day-to-day work as well as for digitizations. So this discussion will be on the open philosophy or the open movement, where the content is also part of the open access publishing. The library development collections generally is done by subscribing to the resources as well as the other documents required for libraries. But in open access mode, the philosophy promote for publishing the content on an open access platform, which can be accessed free of cost to the user. When public libraries are going to adopt this model, then the content created can be given to their users over network. So the discussion will cover both the tool, that is the software, as well as the open access content creation. Now let us look at models. When I am talking about open, the philosophy of open is centered about getting resources free, getting the software which is to be used in computer free of cost. Then free and open, then open source. Open source is a technical term. I will discuss it in detail later. Then open access, that is the publishing model. Then open standards. The technology is changing so fast that whatever format we are using now may get obsolete in a decade's time. Whatever document we created 20 years back cannot be used now because the same software which was used for creation of this content is not the, rather the format in which it is created is also not available. So there is a frequent change of format. So open standard is required. So these three open source, open access, open standards become the base of the movement of open. And this is what is required in library. The philosophy of this open can be accepted even in public libraries, which has been already adopted by many of the academic libraries. Let us see what is open access. The open access can be look in two perspective. The first aspect is that the user who use the content. That is the second one is the author who create the content. Now there is a conflict between these two. The user will be always trying to get the content free of cost and 24/7 access. Then if user want to get the content free of cost and content, what about the author or the owner who owns the content? That is the author. So two aspects, one is author's aspect, the other is user aspect. The author will be always try to maintain that the content is copyrighted content. So when it is copyrighted, the author may accept money for it, or he may anticipate to acknowledge his name, whoever it is using. So that is generally related to the copyright of the content creator, or it becomes the intellectual property right of the author who creates it. Now, putting this content in open platform means author gives permission for the users to access it free of cost, and which will be in digital form. That is what is the basic concept of open access. In users aspect, it should be freely available, that is free availability, and permitting any user to read, download, copy, distribute, print, search, or link it to the other full text articles. Now this also will be available for crawling and indexing, and this can be passed it on to the other software as well. So in an open access content, if a material is created, the material is expected to follow all these criteria which I just mentioned. Now content creation, how to create content and put it in open access, which I will discuss later after discussing the tools, that is the software for creating the content. Now the software, as you know, is a set of code or instruction which is compiled and given to the user to install it is in a computer. You can recollect the person who is having the copyright of this code was one of the time is the richest person in the world. That means the software creator can also mint money by selling it to the people. Now this becomes one of the critical issues. If everybody is forced to buy software, they have to invest a huge amount of money in buying the software, which they have already invested in hardware purchase. And the solution is that make the software free of cost. So this movement started something like a free and open source software movement, or we can do open flows, that is free, liber, and open source software. Then there are foundations like Free Source Software Foundation by Free Software Foundation, and the GNU, which played a major role. GNU stands for GNU is not Unix. It's an recursive acronym for an open source based foundation, and they have developed this most popular OS called Linux. So you will see that GNU Linux all the time, and many distributions. So in short, open source is a technical term. I invite your attention to our former President of India, the People's President, Dr. Abdul Kalam. Once he was walking with one of the proprietary owner of a software in Rashtrapati Bhavan. They were discussing about the use of his software in the country. Finally, Dr. Kalam in 2003, exact date 28th May, he told that in India, open source code software will have to come and stay in a big way for the benefit of our billion people. because the nation like us cannot invest huge amount of money for buying the software. And the reason behind this statement will be explained at the concluding section. If a person is supposed to buy software and all libraries in the country is buying software, the amount of cumulative expenditure cannot be even anticipated or calculated if we go for the paid software. In this, there are a lot of initiatives taken. One is called open source initiative, which started for free distribution of the source code. The software is developed, as I mentioned, by writing different instructions, that is called source code. And the idea is that the source code, you give it to the person who can also contribute something to the source code of it. That means if I write 1,000 lines of code for a software, I can put it in a public domain for sharing it with others, like-minded developer. He can add another 500 lines code or 1,000 lines code. It becomes 2,000 lines. Gradually, over in the internet, this will become 1,000, 1 lakh lines of code, which all will be available for others to again compile, again add, again modify, and give it to the user. That is why the word called open source code, open source software. The source code also is given as software. Now, this can be derived work. Here, integrity of the other source code is also protected because you can give it that the credit should be given to that original author. And that gives freedom for everybody to use without paying money. So no discrimination against any person or group, no discrimination against any field, whether you are physics, chemistry, social science, or computer science. Everywhere the same philosophy applied. It doesn't mean that when software is distributed free, there may not be a license. There could be a license because the license has to be there to mention that this is developed as an open source, so you should not sell it. This kind of licensing agreements are there. There are many popular licenses available. So license must not be specific to a product, or it can give a general instruction on that. And generally these licenses are technology or technologically neutral. That means anybody. These are the main 10 commandments which followed by the open source initiative. Now, why source code? Source code is generally compiled as object code, and object code is the software which we receive as a software in our computer. Now, if source code is there, I can rewrite the code and again compile it a new object code. So that means it's a readable code, it's an editable code, and a lot of memory can be saved on that. And compilation of the source code can be done at any point of time. And this gives freedom for anybody to modify the source code, and which stands as a challenge for the proprietary software. And this could be a threat to the money-making industry where the software is selling. And instead of money-making, in open source code or open source software, we talk about caring and sharing, which is some of the inherent quality of human being. We have the ability to care, to love, and also to share. And open source software, people actually promote this kind of philosophy. So that's why it is not, even if it is a technical term, this demands a kind of philosophical flavor for the concept. Now, when I'm talking about open source, it gives freedom to the user, at least 5 freedom. That freedom is, you can download the software free of cost, you can install and use it in any systems of your choice, you can learn the software and also modify it, and you can copy it. In addition, you can redistribute it to the same peer group for using. So the freedom in open source movement should be read it as free speech, not as the free lunch. Free lunch is that somebody pay money for you and give you a lunch, and the lunch once you eat, you forget about the other aspect of it. That means you get it free of cost in terms of money. But I mentioned that it should be read as free speech. What is a free speech? A free speech, I can listen to a free speech, I can take idea from the free speech, I can also add my own thought to the free speech, and I can also give the speech as it is by protecting the interest of the original speaker to the other community and other users. So that is why free in the open source should be treated as free speech rather than free lunch. So open source software is always free, which also ensure the freedom for the user. Interestingly, looking at the slide, the open philosophy is not for just software. I got this slide from internet. Some of the interesting things, an open cola, which is against the proprietary content of the cola, and they have put the whole recipe, the formula how to create the cola, and it is called open cola. Anybody can make it. Nobody will question you for breaching the ethics of copying somebody's recipe and selling it. So this open cola is interestingly a product which follows the philosophy of open. And in software, in picture you can see the man, a very young boy, Finnish student, who developed a software because he could not afford Unix as an operating system. And operating system is a software which is essential for any computer to use as an interface between the user and the hardware. Machine is just a hardware. So you need a second middle layer software which is called operating system. And Linux is developed an operating system. There are other proprietary operating systems, and Unix was one of the very powerful operating system, secured operating system, robust operating system. But the problem with the Unix was that it was very expensive. So this Finnish boy tried to write some kernel for, his name is Linus Torvald, and sometimes we listen that the Linux, which is very popular as an OS, is defined from his name, Linus Torvalds. And how it is pronounced in a Finnish tongue, you can use it as Linux, or in other tongue, French or etc., you can call it as Linux. So I use it Linux because that is the developer himself refer it to. So Linux is a freeware, and it follows the open development model I discussed. It's a very reliable OS. Its kernel is very powerful, and this directly interact with the hardware and any kind of hardware, not only on computer, even as a very small device like Linux was, Simputron was developed. The Linux was used as the first operating system in that. So this kind of any gadget, if you are using, the Linux version of it can be installed. So Linux becomes a very popular open source software, which is the basic of your computer system, the computer system software. And since many people are writing code, many people compile code, Linux is not a single product. Like Linux has lot of distribution. In short, it is called distro. And Linux follow the Unix file name system because it is derived from the Unix, and that is been given as free of cost. And the history speaks that he developed the 0.02 version of Linux in 1991 and just put it on the internet as a free code. And later, lot of lines are added to this. In 94, a full version 1.0 of Linux kernel was released. And you'll see the Linux mascot. Those who are using Linux as an OS, they will like to use this simple, the Tux, the mascot of Linux operating system. And open source software, the term is coined by Eric Diamond, and which generally stand for free and publicly available. That means the source code. And free software was termed by free software, Richard Stallman, in 1984. It is any software if there is no cost, distribution is zero cost. That means it gives a freedom, which I mentioned. So free software. So they also have Free Software Foundation, Free, Liberal and Open Source Foundation, FLOSS. And Richard Stallman visited India in 1990. And that is the time he gave the concept of developing and using the open source software. And he started writing the GNU project to protect against the copyright and protect the IT world. And by establishing a Free Software Foundation, he started getting a lot of contribution to that, and till Linux Torvald released that in 1991. And the open source initiative was formed by the man Eric Diamond, who coined the word. That is about history. Personally, I like to show one photograph where I could meet Richard Stallman when he visited India first time. And it was an exciting experience that he gave to use it. Since then, wherever I started working, I tried to adopt maximum open source based technologies. When I moved to a library domain, I tried to find out the library software which is used and which will be discussed now. So Richard Stallman is considered as the father of free software movement because of his contribution with the GNU and other. The other platforms, once you have open source operating system with you, all the related software, we have to use a lot of software to use computer in an effective manner. And this has been either approved or promoted by these kind of initiatives. And they are all non-profit corporations promoting this concept of open source software. And one of the famous site which you can visit is sourceforge.net, which gives a lot of aggregation of the softwares developed by different communities. And then if I develop a software free of cost, I can just upload to SourceForge after testing. Some people will test it, they will give their comment. Once everybody gives thumbs up for the software, then it becomes one of the very popular open source software. This is how the open source software is developed. And I will not be going much detail into the development side of the open source software. Now let us see that if there is any license requirement on that. And the license are generally spelled out for public interest, and GNU General Public License, GPL, is one of the very popular license in open source software. And if you have content created like picture, photograph, etc., Creative Commons is also a license standard which you can use it. There are different variation or attributes of this Creative Commons for different kind of creations. Now LGPL, GNU's Lesser General Public License, Artistic License, or BSD, Berkeley System Distribution License, OCLC Research Public License, and Apache Software, which is the Apache Software License, MIT license. These are some of the popular common open source software licenses. Now, whatever we license, I mentioned that copyright is one of the important criteria when author create a content. But this license tried to give copyleft. So the copyright symbol is generally a C with a round. Copyleft, you write a reverse C with a round. That means if that is there, that means content is not copyrighted. So even so, open source software is not copyrighted. That means it is copyleft, commonly referred to as. So any of these license which I mentioned can be used for licensing. Now let us see that what is the difference between open source and proprietary software. We have to look at into 4 different perspectives of it. One is commercial open source software. If it is commercial open source, that means people charge money for its maintenance. If it is a closed source, they charge license fee plus yearly maintenance charges. And proprietary software, they sell it for a fee, and maintenance also they charge. But in community open software, the maintenance software is free, maintenance is free, update is free. So nothing is to be paid. Generally, the disadvantage is that you don't get any support if you are using free software. But there are a lot of voluntary NGOs which give support for the use of popular open source softwares like foundations I mentioned. Now, when source codes are available, we can distribute it. I can also take many components of software, put it together. Like Linux, there are a lot of distributions Linux. You might have heard about Red Hat Linux, which they charge now for the maintenance, but CentOS for server, and I have listed so many other software names in my slides, which you can see that Ubuntu is that, Debian is that, all these are the distribution of Linux. And many a times the distribution also comes with the source code, the derived, and the derived work modification or derived work must be allowed under the same terms which is mentioned in the license. And integrity of the other source code is to be protected. That is one important thing. If open source software is shared, that should also carry the license that the interest of the author should be protected. Now, there are lot of things about it, the terms and etc. you can read from the internet about the licensing term. I have put something which I discussed here: not discrimination, distribute of a life, and not specific to any product, must be restricted. All these are some of the distribution terms when open source softwares are distributed to the users. Now, advantages in nutshell: you save money because lower software cost, and the same software can be used for all similar hardware. Apparently, that means hardware can be common, then you save money on hardware also. Simplified license management and scaling is extension, scaling, and also redevelopment. Such kind of potential support is available, and you are free from the clutches of the vendor who lock in with a unified management. And obviously, this creation is done by so many intellectual people. You get a quality software. That is the advantage of it. And what are the disadvantages of the software? The possibility of slower result due to rapid development. Everybody is contributing to software development, and some patches are coming. And to incorporate all the patches, the moment I accept a model, there will be many updates on that from various angles. And that is one disadvantage. And open source software can tend to evolve more in line with the developer's wishes than the need of end user. So developer, whatever fancy he see in developing side, without taking the end user concept, that is one disadvantage. And strong user involvement and participation throughout a project becomes problematic because everybody is contributing on voluntary basis. And rapid releases are quite frequent in open source software. The moment you use 4.0, next within 1 or 2 months you will get 4.1. But commercial software, such kind of fast upgradation is not done. And many a time, since developers' focus is on code, the user friendliness is always questioned. And no single source of information. There will be so many sites for the same software. And system development and training is more expensive if somebody take it. That is the one more disadvantage for using disadvantage. But apart from these listed disadvantages, people can save a lot of money, and technically you can contribute it if you put your effort for developing. Now, some examples of general use: popular open source software, 7-zip you know that the general zip software which you are using on your proprietary OS is paid now. They will ask for registration fee, but 7 fee for compressing the file is free. Apache is a leading software company which has lot of their product, like Apache Tomcat is there, their web server software is there are other Maven is there, lot of softwares, tools in open software. This Apache has released. Blender, FileZilla, Firefox. Mozilla Firefox is very common browser against its counterpart proprietary browser, and this has been used even in all platforms now. And OS we have Linux, various distros, and database is one of the important component used in laboratories. So MySQL and PostgreSQL are very popular open source software. That's a software used for database management system. Then we use lot of office related work in computer like Excel, Word, PowerPoint, and proprietary software was sold in such an extent that everybody had a feeling of using it, its interface, fancy with the interface it is offering. Now, with the great effort, open source community has developed equal open source, open office product. You can use Word, Excel, whatever you are access, PowerPoint, whatever I am mentioning. Any proprietary software you mention, we have an equivalent open source product in it. So this is one example, Open Office, Star Office, then Perl for development, PHP is widely used for writing as a scripting language, or it's a programming language which can connect to the MySQL processor to give very good web applications. So that means the platform is entirely free if you are using MySQL, PHP, etc. And SendMail for email software, Speak Freely, Thunderbird, and internet telephony software, Speak Freely. And you have a lot of content which is uploaded into Wikipedia. And this wiki also came as a collaborative content creator. So similarly how Wikipedia content is created, similarly software is also been developed as a group effort. Now library, let us see what are the software. So far what I have discussed, the general software used in a computer which is under open source category. Now very popular library management software is Koha. Koha is a fully featured open source library management system. It was initially developed by Harrow Library Trust, New Zealand in 2000. Later, it has been completely made it as free of cost to the open source community. A lot of development is also happening in Koha. If you are using any library automation software, proprietary, Koha support almost all the features. The only issue with that, Koha needs a little bit of training either on installation part or administration part. The using is very simple. Evergreen, Open Biblio is an easy to use open source automated library system for administration functionality. And another one is NewGenLib, which is added recently to the open source community. Recently, in a sense, I could say that maybe 4 or 5 years back as an open source. It was developed in Hyderabad, and finally it is given to the open source community. Then social, online and public access catalog. These are some of the open source based library software for automation work. Now, any library, there are two kind of works, two types of work. One is the content creation, another is the content distribution. So you need a library automation software for systematically giving its content to the users, its clienteles. For this, any of this Koha, NewGenLib, this all can be used. I have not tested the other three, but these two software I have tested and seeing that it is working very well in the normal working library environment. Now, for content creation, we need a software. Before going to the software, let me also explain what is a digital library software. The content or publications in a library, generally it is in physical form, like book, thesis, serials, journals, and any kind of material. And that is what is called the collections in a library. And these collections are available for users to not subscribe, to take it from the library. Like a library can lend you this if you are a member of the library. So this is how library generally work. So they will issue this content to them. After your use, you return it to this. This is library activity. So library, to give this content in physical form, we do not need any software except automation software. But when you are creating content, let us say that the content which I talked, the books, thesis, everything is electronic form, that is in digital form. We need a digital library software to host the content. Earlier books were in physical form. Now books are in digital form. So when books are in digital form, there should be a software to hold the digital content, index it, giving the search interface to the user. All this can be, activities can be clubbed together in a software. And there are so many digital library software. Preferably, I should prefer to call as digital library software rather than the electronic. Electronic is a clumsy word which denotes a lot of other things. But somewhere you will also see that electronic library software. But 99% times people use digital library software for that. So some of the examples, 3 software which we tested, we are using is, one is DSpace, another is ePrints, another is Greenstone. So D and S capital in DSpace. The DSpace is a digital library system. It was developed by MIT in association with HP, and finally it has given in the license as free software, that is open source software. Then we have ePrint, then Fedora, then Greenstone. ePrints and Greenstone is extensively used in India for creation of digital library content. And there are other called Invenio, Dynest, which I listed as the top, which is also available. So those who are trying to experiment with open source digital library software, I think that we should evaluate all the software before using it. And some of the popular library management applications are AirTutor. AirTutor is generally for delivering lecture, etc. on internet. Then Corel, CUFTS. Corel is an electronic resource management system which can be used in library. CUFTS is an open source software developed by Simon Fraser University. It was designed to use in a consortia environment. And Drupal, free and open source content management system. Joomla and Drupal, these are the 2 open source software used extensively for creation of content management system. Then other tools and applications, Godot, Manhattan, Moodle. Moodle is also an open source software for learning, that is e-learning platform, Moodle. And the virtual classrooms are there from Manhattan. So I have listed few of the library software which is used as automation software, as digital library software, as well as the other applications or other services which is used in library. Earlier I mentioned that there are a lot of distribution of Linux. So from the slide you can read that Fedora from Red Hat, Mandrake, Debian, SUSE, Caldera, Slackware, Coral Linux, Ubuntu, and the server version which generally is used now. That is also very popular Linux distribution. Now common packages which I list: OpenOffice, StarOffice, Apache, Jetty, DBMS2, compilers, email server, proxy in nutshell. Open source software also now support multilingual approach. The multilingual means Unicode based, as you can see in the slide, Unicode based regional languages can be created with open source tools. And this is one thing, the Linux in fact comes with many Indian languages. This is one language which I know. So the Linux complete interface is in that regional language. And software for digital library and OCR, scanning, whatever you mentioned for web designing, RDBMS, anything, you have a lot of software which are used. In back slide, you can also see some of the commercial software I listed, which is used in digital library. But you have the equivalent version of open source software available for it. And in nutshell, you can use a simple LAMP. LAMP is for lighting, but here LAMP stand for the combination of all the open source tool, starting from the operating system. L stand for, you can see from the slide, L stand for Linux, A stand for Apache, M stand for MySQL, and P stand for PHP or Perl as a scripting language. So if you are using this Apache web server, MySQL database, PHP for writing program, and Linux as the platform, you have the completely solution in open source for making any library development software, LAMP. And if you want to use the last three, Apache, MySQL, Postgres, with your favorite proprietary system, that is also possible, WAMP, which works with Windows. So to start with, you can start with WAMP, then move to the Linux platform later. And these are the listed software which I mentioned there for DL. Then a digital library generally is used for capturing the content from the user, or that is as a submission process of the digital content, and you index it with metadata as I listed in the management. Then once it is there, you preserve it in a storage. There the database is used, and a curator will see that what kind of content should come. He is the collection community supervisor. So the workflow is completely can be managed with this software. Finally, whatever is a user search, he retrieved from the redistributed network. So that is what the open source software do for the library. So ICT to accelerate library and information management. You have technology, you have library automation, you have digital library, and you have the associate terms like electronic libraries, digital libraries, networking model, virtual library. But all these are required to run a modern library. Now, how much we spend on software? Very shocking figure if you go for all the proprietary. Let us take the Indian library system, a vast country which has so many libraries in the country. I have listed some libraries. I assume that every university must have a library. So 730 university libraries, 500 special libraries, 35,500 college libraries, and 55,000 approximately public libraries. And as per RRRLF, I think there could be 30,000, 25 to 30,000 libraries, and 10 lakh school libraries. All school may not be having libraries, but just and private collection. And if I buy open source proprietary software by paying, including operating system, one OS may cost from 3,000 Indian rupees to any up to 1 lakh, 2 lakhs, whatever feature you require. In addition, you need that Office another 3,000 rupees. So if you take an average spend of 10,000 to 15,000, look at the figure. I have put it in the lower. The huge money where India cannot afford to spend for the proprietary software. So open source software should come in conclusion as a philosophy than technology. We need to have open source based open access resources to build the open libraries, public libraries. Security and sanctity should be assured or ascertained by the people who are administrating it. And we become free from the budget, free from dependency, free from your financial boss. Have an open heart when you are sitting in the library, looking into the open source software. in conclusion, open source software can take you along with the open access content into a free world where the money can be saved for the nation exchequer. While concluding, I just show you some of the software. This is the DSpace which I mentioned, open source digital library software, ePrint, the homepage, Greenstone, multilingual support, then open access content. Morning I was just going through some of the open DOR and open access journal search engine, OJSEA. I was seeing that at least maybe 100 repositories are free to give. Shodh Ganga, which is Influminate product of thesis, which is full text content, full text thesis, which we celebrated 50,000 thesis day before yesterday. So this is our open access content. It is absolutely free, no registration, no payment. Come and use the full text thesis available in the registry. Open access repositories in India, IISc, this is Raman Research Institute, this is from OpenMed, this is the content from NCL, National Institute of Oceanography, Library and Digital Library. So with that, I think I have discussed all the models required for open source and open access. Use it with an open heart for creation of an open world.